So I've been trying to make today's video for about 3 days now, and I keep messing things up. But then after I made a few mistakes, the idea for the video kind of shifted. So this is now my third attempt at making today's video, but we're doing something a little bit different than I would normally do. So the original idea for this video was to install these little floor LEDs, and to make it a little bit more unique, I decided that I was going to modify them. So I shortened the length in between the light sources, so that way I have 2 light sources on the driver and passenger side of this car, because there's kind of no need to put them in the back seat of this car. On top of that though, I wanted the power source to be coming from my parking light switch, so that way when I turn this on, the dash lights would come on, but also the floor lights would come on. So after trying to make that work for days and literally just going in circles and buying new parts because I thought that I messed up the old ones and just all this stuff, it was a disaster. I realized that for whatever reason, this switch only runs 11.5 volts. I think it's because it's hooked up to some relays, and these need 12.5 volts to function. And I probably could have figured that out sooner, but I mean, I'm still learning. I don't know what I'm doing. So I was pretty bummed out for a little bit, but then I remembered that I had these little aftermarket switches. So these are like some little switches that go inside of like a fighter jet or something like that. And they even came with like the little covers. I'm probably not gonna run this one because it's blue, and I think that might be a little bit tacky, but I have some that have black covers. And while I kind of wanted everything to be an OEM fitment, I didn't really want to have like crazy switches and everything like that. I also really like the idea of having like the little switches that flip up and then you like click on your lights, or you engage your nitrous and you go freaking Paul Walker mode on them and whatnot. So the final idea for this video is to link up these floor lights still. I'm still doing that, but instead of it being an OEM sort of look, I'm going for a not so OEM fighter jet switch hookup for them. And I really hope I don't mess this up, because that'll be the 3rd time that I've messed up this video. So let's get into it. So these are like the Govee, whatever lights off of Amazon, and they basically come with these long wires, and there's 4 light sources. And then originally this would plug into a cigarette lighter, but I've cut this one off. So for my car, I didn't really see a purpose in putting these lights in the back seats because there's about enough floor space back there for a rubber ducky. So what I did instead is I took this strip of lights and I modified it so that way there was a short distance between these wires, and I can kind of overlap it a little bit and just have one big long light source underneath each side of the dash, and I'm only going to be running them in the front seats. So I've also modified this end so that way it doesn't have a cigarette lighter plug, and instead I just have this power and ground. So this power will run through the switch and then go to the power source from the car, and then this can just be grounded wherever, but for simplicity's sake I'll probably just ground it into the same power source ground, if that makes sense. It'll make sense in a minute. With that out of the way, I'm going to start tearing apart the inside of this car. Alright guys, so pretty much got this whole interior on the driver's side stripped out. And so what I was originally thinking was that I was going to have the switches going along this little flat piece right here. The problem is that this is kind of at an angle, and I didn't want the switches to not line up because I wanted things to be at a right angle. And also there's a lot of plastic behind here that I wouldn't be able to cut away. So I don't think that that's really the ideal spot. So the alternative is to put them above the stock light switch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drill some holes in this little piece of plastic, and they'll go right above this. The only problem is that this little chunk of plastic needs to go. I already started cutting away at it a little bit, but this little clip holder needs to stay here. Other than that, this piece is kind of just useless, I guess. I mean, I'm sure it has a purpose, but that purpose is gonna be no more. It's times like this that I wish that I had a Dremel tool, because I don't have a Dremel, so I think I'm just gonna start like drilling holes in it and then kind of cut it away and shave it down. Alright, so I've got this hole dug out as much as I'm going to. I could sit here and spend some time trying to make this like super smooth, but it's gonna be underneath the dash, so I'm really not that concerned about it. I've used these switches as a reference, so the switch fits inside this space just barely. I think one of the power wires is gonna run through this little hole, and then the other end of the power wire will run down here. My next step is to figure out where this switch is gonna go on this panel. So I did a little bit of comparing, and this switch fits perfectly on this little flat surface right here, and that's right above where the stock light switches are. So I believe that that's where I'm going to put the switches, but I need to make sure that there's enough space in between this little clip and the switch itself, but it'll probably go somewhere right around here. Okay boys, this is coming out really sick. So I still have to tighten them down and make sure that they're lined up and everything like that, but check this out. So the switch will be able to flip up, and then you click this on, and then to turn it off, you just close it and it automatically shuts the switch back off. That is just so sick. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and put a couple more switches on here, and even if they're not used in the future, I'll just have extra switches should I want to wire anything up using these switches. And then once I'm done doing this, we're gonna go and figure out the power source for the lights, and then we'll start putting everything back together. Okay guys, so I've got the switch panel back in the car, and well, I need to do some minor adjusting. But before we do this, I need to establish the power and ground source for the lights themselves, because I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with the switch panel. I mean, that's cool and all, but the lights have to have power. So these two wires right here run into the center console, and so one of these is a ground and one's a power. I'm assuming the yellow one is power. So I'm just gonna tap into that power source and then run it up through the dash. So it'll go underneath here, probably come up around there somewhere, run into the dash, and then that'll run to the switch. And then after the switch, that power source will lead to the lights themselves. So got a bit of soldering to do, but I think that the hard part is out of the way, because I was really nervous that these switches were gonna not line up or something like that, but they came out pretty good. Alright, so I've got the power and the ground wires all wired up and everything. So this power wire is currently running under the center console right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just lead it up into the dash a little bit so I can get it up to the switch. Now I have a lot of extra wire on this because once I connect it to the switch, I'm going to pull that relatively tight. Like, it'll still have some slack, but it's going to be more tight than this is. This is providing way too much. So then I'll connect the other end of this wire to the other end of the switch, and that'll lead to the lights. I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to show you guys because it's a little hard to explain. Earlier I stopped recording because I accidentally blew a fuse because I was trying to move the cables over and my dumbass didn't disconnect the battery, and the ground and the positive touch together, which, by the way, if you guys don't know, if you have two hot wires, one's ground and one's positive, do not touch them together. So we had to go to AutoZone. I got a new fuse put in. I got this conducting electricity again, so I'm gonna just plug this back in. And so now we should be able to test the switch, but before I can do that, I have to just quickly wrap this around the switch. So the way that these switches work is that you connect the positive lead coming from the power source to this, and then the positive lead that's going to whatever it is that you want to this. It doesn't really matter which one you connect it to because the switch basically just opens and closes the circuit. But you connect the power sources to these. One goes to the lights or whatever you're powering, one goes to the power source, and then once that's done, you should be able to open and close the circuit. Also, you have to ground it still, but the ground goes to the lights themselves. The switch is just power and power. I hope that made sense. It's really hard for me to explain. I've been at this for hours, okay? For days. I've been at this for days. You guys didn't see it, but it's been days. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this power cable coming from the power source needs to wrap around this little screw thing. I always try to wrap it clockwise so that way as you're tightening it, it doesn't unwrap itself. All right, so now this is the power cable because I have this one connected to the bottom of the switch already. Now this is the power cable for the lights. So we're gonna connect this, and then this is the ground. Now these lights better come on. If these lights don't come on, I'm gonna lose it. So they shouldn't come on now. Good. Now when I flip this switch, yes! Yes! It worked! So now I should be able to, like, yeah. And I can control this with an app on my phone, so that's not really a big deal, but I probably look like a maniac. This is gonna go on YouTube. And then when I flip this down, hell yes! People say Fords are hard to work on. What are you, stupid? Dude, the switch is clapping my cheeks right now. That's a metaphor, Jason. Calm down. Hopefully I can get the bolt on that.
It's weird they call that a nut.
You're right. It is a nut. Hopefully I can get a nut on it. I feel like I'm picking a lock in Skyrim. You ever play Skyrim, Jason?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was about to send you home if you said no.
Yeah, no kidding.
Here's a pro tip for you guys. Before I put solder, I always try to squish the wires together as much as possible. That way, if for whatever reason the solder were to come off, which I mean it doesn't, the wires are still like linked pretty good. Yeah, whatever, dude. That's fine. The main thing is just to bridge the connection. As long as it drips down in there. That's quite the bulge. Oh God. He's packing.
Those beads.
Yeah, that was probably the worst soldering job of this entire thing.
You need a new soldering iron. I don't know how he even solders at all.
Dude, I'm the soldering god. Could you imagine if I had a good one? I'd be so damn good at this. I find that when I'm going between two different sizes of wires, I like to just use electrical tape because the heat shrink will shrink tight around one, but then it only shrinks to an extent. So like this being a tiny wire, I like to have electrical tape to kind of grab it a little bit tighter. You want to make sure you get your form right when you're soldering.
Based on the steering wheel, right?
Yep. If the airbag goes off, I'm gonna die. I mean, it's a bit of a bulge, but you know, nothing's wrong with a little bit of a bulge, you know? Okay. I've got them wired up, so now these light sources have to go down here. So this has 3M tape on the inside of it, so I'm gonna go and stick this underneath the dash somewhere. I just spilt my sockets everywhere. God damn it. So I'm gonna stick this to one of the little ECUs that's underneath the dash. There's like a couple under there. I'll show it once I've done it, but in the meantime, you'll just see this little bridge position that I do. Think fast. I should start doing yoga. All right, it's stuck. Ah. I'm gonna cry. Okay, it's stuck onto the little computer thing. This one needs to go to the passenger side, so we're just gonna kind of yeet it over here.
Oh, there's a hole through there?
Somewhere. Yep.
Look at that.
Yep, it's a Ford. Of course there's a hole. And now I'm gonna start working some zip tie magic. So I think the best method to installing these lights is to get myself into guillotine position. Well, this is rated PG. My face is probably getting so red. Zip ties, man, they're like the worst, best invention ever. Like, they work great until you're like, why don't you work? Zip ties work great, and then you just walk in on your girlfriend cheating on you with the zip ties, and you're like, I thought we were friends, you know? That ever happened to you, Jason?
All the time.
Dude, this is starting to look sick. I need to get my ugly ass out of here to look a lot better. See, the lights are right in my eyes, and I can't quite see what I'm doing. No, I need the lights in my eyes. Jason, put the back on. Ah! Currently fighting a zip tie. Come on, tie of zip. Why won't you zip? Okay, so now we can have an absolute vibe session here, but not on camera because we have to use royalty-free music. Anyway, I'm gonna continue this video later. I'm gonna clean this out off camera and then I'll make you guys a little edit or something. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to leave a like down below. It really helps out the channel when you guys do that. Also, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, and dream big.